You may not be able to have as much fun as you would in, say, a Ford Fiesta, but the Ibiza is still great for nipping from A to B.
Kia Rio, ditto. And then the Ford Fiesta is just brilliant fun to drive.
As standard and a driving experience that makes this just as fun to drive as a Ford Fiesta.
If so, consider the Ford Fiesta hatchback. It's priced similar to the Yaris, but it's more fun to drive and has a nicer interior.
So, where does that leave us?
Well, the Ford Fiesta is without doubt the most fun to drive. It really is a laugh, actually. Rio, by clicking on that video window up there. If it's a more fun to drive Super Mini you're after, check out our review of the Ford Fiesta by clicking down there. Turning, but actually, yeah, it does a good enough job. It's not brilliant. It's not as much fun as something like a Ford Fiesta, but it's as good as it needs to be, and that's fine.
And it's pretty good around town as well. It's definitely not as much fun as the Ford Fiesta, but then few cars in this class are.
Ford Fiesta as an example, yeah, it is a really fun car to drive.
Lively on faster roads and it doesn't feel breathless on the motorway. The Polo isn't as much fun to drive as the Fiesta, but there's a fair amount of body lean through the...
A Renault Clio is much roomier. The 208 isn't as comfortable as a Clio nor as fun to drive as a Ford Fiesta.
So there you have it.
The experience altogether. In this respect, this impressively refined C3 is a world away from its predecessor. A Fiesta rolls less and is still more fun to drive.
Entertainment system, so I would say you're much better off spending the extra and getting a Corolla hatchback, or even something more fun like a Fiesta.
Thing is though, some people want their Super Mini to be a bit feisty. While the Corsa drives very well, it just lacks that fun factor of the Ford Fiesta.
Well, out on the road in the Clio, and it's not too bad. I mean, yeah, it's not as good as its rivals. I mean, it's not as fun to drive as the Fiesta.
It's actually pretty decent, with well-weighted steering, not too much body lean in corners, and enough grip to have some fun. Still not good enough to topple a Ford Fiesta for driving enjoyment.
All soggy and stuff. It's not quite as fun to drive as a Ford Fiesta because the steering. The steering's just a bit, yeah.
Whilst the diesels aren't really worth their extra cost unless you have a high annual mileage. The i20 may not be as much fun as, say, a Fiesta to drive, but it's stable and predictable.
There are a few areas where it's not so good. With its soft suspension and numb steering, the C3 is positioned at the comfortable end of the market. A Ford Fiesta is considerably more fun to drive.
A polished little hatchback. If you want the sharpest, most fun small hatch, then the Ford Fiesta remains the best bet. But the Skoda is more than acceptable.
And light in the rear, which makes manoeuvring urban environments and parking up incredibly easy. But it is a bit vague feedback-wise. This means it's not as fun or as assuring as the Fiesta on winding country roads. Full Super Mini option, and that does become abundantly clear when you head out on the road, because the Yaris isn't particularly, well, it's not particularly fun. It doesn't thrive on country roads like the Ford Fiesta does, but
So, the Fabia has a bigger interior and it's better on a long journey, whereas the Fiesta is more fun to drive.
Even at higher speeds and the handling, it's safe, it's secure and it's very predictable. That said, I wouldn't describe this as a fun car to drive in the same way that a Mazda 2 or a Ford Fiesta is.
Or if you're slightly nervous behind the wheel, and being narrow and having responsive controls, it's very easy to park. What the Polo's not is a lot of fun. For that, a Ford Fiesta or a Mazda 2 is a better bet.
However, is the Polo car which will make you drop off behind the wheel when you drive it?
Well, okay, it doesn't feel quite as sporty or as fun as a Ford Fiesta, but really?
Is Kia Rio, if you want a reliable, cheap to run car for a motorway commute. If you want a small, fun car for little money, I'd look at maybe getting a Ford Fiesta instead.
Impressive though is the way the Ibiza feels like a bigger car, and we don't mean in terms of its size, more how composed it is. Granted, a Ford Fiesta is more fun through the corners.
Bends. Throw in an imprecise gear shift and sluggish steering, which weights up inconsistently at speed, and the result is that the Polo is much less fun than a Ford Fiesta.
It's got loads of kit and it's got an attractive warranty. You could do a lot worse, and it's actually great for those who want a stylish yet not overtly flashy Super Mini. And okay, it may still not be the pick of the bunch for down and out fun like the Fiesta or
small car.
But even with all of that, it can't compete with the Seat Ibiza when it comes to driving fun, and it certainly doesn't come close to the class leader, which is, of course, the Fiesta.
And now you've done that, let me tell you what I think about these two cars. Well, the Ford Fiesta, it's a really good small car and it's fun to drive as well. And if that's your bag, get it, you won't be disappointed. Polo, I think that's a great car if you're downsizing from a bigger vehicle, but it just lacks that certain something, doesn't it?
Yes, fun.
Fun, that's right.
Which means our winner is the Ford Fiesta.
The suspension, it stops the car leaning so much. It actually goes around corners really well. Dare I say it? It's actually a little bit of fun. Not quite as much fun as a Ford Fiesta. You see that car, it's more playful too. I mean, there's plenty of grip and there's hardly any body roll in corners. I like the gear shift as well because it's almost as sharp as on many sports cars. That said, the car still isn't as much fun as more zesty super minis such as the Ford Fiesta, and the reason for that.
Because while the Skoda Fabia caters for those who place a lot of weight on practicality and value for money, and the Ford Fiesta is all about driving fun, Seat's raison d'etre centres around style, pizzazz and youthfulness.
Now, passengers might be pleased to hear that this isn't the kind of car which encourages its driver to chuck it about. However, if you're the kind of person who thinks that a Super Mini should also be fun, I have two words for you. Ford Fiesta. How it handles. It's a bit more sporty, the setup of this car, and you can get an FR version which has sportier suspension, and then it's just a little bit more keen through the corners. It's not quite as much fun still as a Ford Fiesta, but it is slightly more of a laugh to chuck around. It's actually quite a decent car to drive. It goes around corners pretty well. Look, you can fling it about and it grips. It doesn't roll too much at all. I wouldn't say that it was fun in the same way that a Ford Fiesta is, and part of the reason for that is that the steering just feels a little bit disconnected. Polo handles securely, predictably and safely. It's not actually that exciting to drive, and if having fun when the road gets twisty is your thing, you're probably better off looking at, say, a Ford Fiesta or a Mazda 2.
And you'll get over 50 miles per gallon.
Okay, everything looks rosy so far then, but we haven't got into the i20's biggest challenge yet. The Fiesta has always been head and shoulders above the rest in how much fun it is.
New generations, for example the Ford Fiesta, this one here is more silent. The Ford Fiesta was also really fun in driving. That was, also one of the main characteristics. So
the high-tech little Renault is good, but the stupid gearbox spoils your fun. And that leaves it vulnerable to attack from this. The Ford Fiesta.